Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. As the chair of the select board, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12 pursuant to the executive order 2020-04, this board has authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are providing the public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Google Meet's platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate during this meeting through the Google Meet's platform, and the public has access to listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following number, 415-634-7230, and the password is 510-628-614, or by clicking on the following website, meet.google.com/NSP-TGJ0-VQE. Providing public notice of the necessary information for assessing this meeting. We previously gave notice to the public on how to access the meeting using Google Meets, and instructions are provided on the town website at rollinsford.nh.us. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there's any problems to access, and if anybody has a problem, please call 534-1049 or email at admin@rollinsford.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes will be taken during this meeting shall be done by a roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking the roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required by the right to know law. Miles?
Present and alone.
Paul?
Present and alone.
And Denise, present and alone. And we can also note that Charlie Putnam and Kate Nesman is here in part of the meeting, as well as Salme Perry and Caroline Kendall. Okay, let's go. Who's running the meeting? Not me, right?
It is a select board meeting, but the reason we are here, I was really the requester of this meeting after Charlie was so kind enough to keep us informed about discussions on the moderator listserv about protocols for this election. And I know that Kate's been paying attention to emails as well from the Secretary of State's office. And so I just thought it prudent to get everybody together because I know everybody, at least the board members, there are questions about how this election is going to be run. What is the PPE for people? What is the traffic flow? Will there be a separate area for people who refuse to wear masks, and some things like that? And then maybe hear from Kate too about how absentee ballots are going. Those are just some topics I had in mind, but I'm sure there may be other questions.
Okay, so we'll open it up to either Kate or Charlie, to whichever one it appropriately falls under. But how will it be ran this election different than any other election?
I'm going to defer to Kate because she knows what she's doing.
Okay, very good. Kate, can you help?
You're muted, Kate.
Kate, you're muted. Get on mute.
There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's going to be upscaled from the March election, which COVID was present during that time, and we were very careful. We have been blessed with, my entire office is full of supplies from the Secretary of State's office, that we can run this election completely safely. I'm not really worried about the September election because we generally get about 350 people. We're up to about 100 absentee ballots at this point, and I think that will just increase. I don't think we're going to have a big flow at the election. But the Secretary of State has supplied us with N95 masks, with sneeze protective screens, thousands of pens, masks, sanitizer. I mean, I'm looking through the room. We've got everything that we could possibly use. I am not concerned about people who do show up for election that won't follow the rules. If there is somebody who refuses to wear a mask, I'm willing to go outside and have them vote outside of the building to protect the safety of other voters and the volunteers. I've contacted all of my volunteers. Everybody's on board. I haven't had anybody who's uncomfortable coming. I've watched the Zoom meetings from the state physician who made recommendations about not having buffet style foods. So in order to feed the election workers, we'll have to have individual boxes or, things set up individually opposed to a buffet. I really have zero concerns about the September election. And I think it's going to be a good gauge for us for November. I did talk to them today about, I've been on them at the company who provides us with the ballot machine. We are second on the list. They are not able to provide us with one at this point. If we have to limp through in September with one ballot machine, we can do that. But I really am pushing hard for 2 for November.
Okay. So can I throw a couple things out there right off?
Sure.
Thanks, Kate. So one thing is, obviously what you said is you've answered a couple of my questions already, so thank you. But with going outside for voters who may refuse to wear a mask, or there may be obviously a few people who actually have real health problems that can't wear a mask.
Right. Some people cannot breathe through a mask.
We should be able to set up like an outdoor type tent site area for you, so it's convenient. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we actually, Charlie and I did this for an individual at our last election. We went right out to their vehicle. And to me, if I'm wearing a mask and protective gear and I'm willing to go out, I'm safe, they're safe. I think that's fine. I think if we set up a particular spot, you're going to have abuse. People who want that privilege to just, pull up to some specialty booth. But, I can't see a single resident. We have such good residents that's going to object, because anyone who's come in this office completely complies. The mask, wiping down the counter, they're only protecting themselves as well.
Okay.
And if there is an individual, and Charlie and I did have an individual at the last election who wasn't, she didn't make the deadline for the absentee ballot, and she wasn't physically capable of coming in. So we went out, and we can do that.
Okay, great, perfect. And then I lost my train of thought. I had one last question for you. Obviously, you got all the PPE because you said all that. I agree with you 100%. So we'll sort of look at the September election as a stage rehearsal for the November one, because that's going to be
Exactly.
So
Yeah, like a template.
perfect. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the questions,
I'm sorry.
I was going to add a further comment to Kate. I think those procedures all make sense. It's a lot different when you've only got one person who is requesting curbside voting.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, somebody could complain. What we do when we get a curbside vote is we walk it to the AccuVote machine. That person who has cast the vote isn't the person who puts it into the machine. But I think it's probably going to be Kate that's going to walk it in, or me if I'm if we're going to spell Kate. I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable saying that, you know, Kate and I are trustworthy and reliable. We're not going to change that ballot between the time that we take it from the voter and deposit it in the machine. You may want to be prepared for somebody saying, you know, oh my God, you know, I didn't get to put it in a machine myself. And I think that the response is some form of, we don't have enough poll workers. We weren't able to pay additional poll workers to run a separate voting place for people who didn't want to mask up. And I think that's the right response. And I think I trust Kate. I trust her assessment that there aren't that many people that are going to try to test us on it at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question on that? If they're so concerned about it going from the car to the poll, to the ballot machine, why didn't they send an absentee? Would be my question to them. I mean, bottom line is, I mean, it is, you have an option to do that before that day. So I guess I really don't understand.
You may get an individual who's had an unusual set of circumstances. They may have been hospitalized. There may be a reason they couldn't get an absentee ballot. And at that point, and if somebody disputed that, I would ask them to pick a witness, whether it's the person who drove them in, or if it was Charlie and myself, or a supervisor and myself, you know, that there were two of us that ensured that the ballot went through the machine. But there are circumstances where people, you know, they don't realize the election was so close. They don't have a printer. They couldn't get an absentee form. I mean, there are situations.
Okay, I'm all set. Miles?
I didn't have anything. All this sounds great. I really appreciate you guys thinking this through. And yeah, we'll see how this goes in September and learn from our observations.
Yes.
I won't say mistakes because I'm not anticipating any.
I think the biggest problem we're going to come across in November is by not being open to the public. We always have offered same-day registration. Well, that's not going to apply. You know, people who are uncomfortable showing up at the election aren't going to want to show up for same-day registration. The Tuesday nights have been an incredible success. Last Tuesday night, I think we registered nearly 20 new registrants. I'm going to guess during COVID, we've seen at least 50 to 60 new residents. So hopefully they're getting in here for September, but I think last presidential election, we had 120 people show up the day of the election to register to vote. That might be a little problem, but we'll just have to deal with it as it comes.
Okay. So Denise, I was just going to give a quick scenario of what could happen with some of our residents. I'll give you, like, for instance, if my parents were still alive, which they're not, but you know, they'd be in their 80s, they'd be in their 90s now, but they wouldn't understand internet or anything like that, or absentee voting. So they may, some of the older residents may choose to show up but not feel comfortable coming in, and they didn't know the procedure about absentee balloting. And I'm going to guess it's going to be less than like 5 people, but that's a possibility. Does that sound right, Kate?
It does.
Older residents that don't really know the procedure and what they should do.
It does, Paul. In, you know, I think between Charlie and I, our goal is that everyone gets to vote. However we do it, whether the AG's office is in support of the way we do it or not, we'll deal with that after the fact. But anyone who's a registered voter, will make every effort for them to be able to vote.
Well, thank you for that, both of you. Okay.
It's an important election coming up.
And Kate, I just had a question for you, if I can intervene. Do we have a way for voters who have taken the absentee ballot? Is there like a way that they can drop the ballot back to us without going through USPS?
Yeah, I would say 60% of the ones that have gone out, people are using the drop box at the front door and they're very pleased with it. I mean, we pick up each day and it's noted as soon as they come in the day that it was received, because we have to enter that in the state system. I encourage people to do that rather than through the mail. Kevin has shown me the process when I bring over, 30 or 40 of them going out. There's a particular bright green flag that goes with those, separated from the rest of the mail, indicating all the way through that it's an absentee ballot and its importance. I know other states are having problems, but we're small enough that we are controlling it. And you have to remember, every person who applies for an absentee ballot, I submit that information through the system. So I also keep track of those who haven't come back in. And I've always picked up the phone to especially elderly people who haven't come back in to offer to pick them up.
Great, thanks.
That sounds good.
So I was just wondering how, you said you've got about 100 absentee ballots so far, and I'm just wondering how that process is going and how you're managing that. And are you receiving most of them back already, or are they mostly still out there and you're waiting for them to come in?
No, we're receiving them back, and I can't be any more appreciative than the supervisors who are giving up their time every Tuesday from 3 to 7, coming in and not only taking applications and entering people, because that's another problem. We have people who want an absentee ballot, but they're not registered to vote. So they got to register to vote to be able to get an absentee ballot. And they've been exceptional. I'm having a pizza party for them here tomorrow night because they're doing this on their own time. And it's working. It's working. Yes. The absentee ballots are going out. They're coming in. They've been wonderful registering people, helping me organize it, getting it in the state system. This election, so far, so good. It's the November one. When we go from 300 absentees to 1,800, it's a big difference.
So, Kate, about that, do you think it would be worthwhile to, should we be doing something about messaging so that people know, the message already went out that we're open for these two Tuesdays. So board members, it might be a good time to revisit that conversation tonight rather than waiting until next Monday night to see if you want to continue Tuesdays between now and the election. But also,
well, let me interrupt, Caroline. We're doing that on a voluntary basis, but September 1st is required by law that the supervisors be here. And that's basically the last time for people to come in and register to vote. So that has all been advertised. I have responded back to Foster's. We're using the website. I've had it posted at the post office and Foster's. I don't know how.
So what I was going to say is, does it make sense to suggest to people that they might want to check the box to have this be their one form for both elections? If the virus is their concern, or if they anticipate also wanting an absentee, wouldn't that save you time if people would just do the one form for both elections?
That would be great, but it doesn't work that way. You have to enter each election in the system as the election appears. Now, you can apply for the September, November. A lot of people don't choose to do that. They're doing one election at a time, not knowing what the threat or concern could be in the following election. So we are maintaining both files. If somebody fills out an application for November or September and November, we're getting through the September election, and then we'll start processing the November ones. But you do have to apply for each election.
You mean, so with the one form, you mean to say that you're entering it in twice, even if they do one form for both elections?
Yes, because with an absentee ballot, as soon as somebody applies for it, you have to enter it in the state system and you have to tell whether it came by mail, by person, by fax. You have to put the date in, the time, and then when you get it back, you have to go back in and enter that information and the address, whether they're away, it was due to COVID or whatever reasoning they check off. And that is not like a universal sign in. So when the next election comes, I have to do the same process for the same person.
Okay, thank you.
Kate, are you going to be able to declare your party at the polls, or do you have to do that beforehand?
Clear my party?
Declare the Republican or Democrat?
No, that ended. That was in September. Anybody, they have to take either the Democratic or Republican ballot based on what they were registered as. An independent can claim one or the other, but that's another process. They do have to be in person. If say you're independent and you voted Democrat and you want to go back to independent or go back to Democrat, you have to be there. There's a form that needs to be completed. So it's not, I don't think it's a big issue in the September one, but in the November one, it's gonna be.
So you can declare it then, and then you have to go back to the supervisors of the checklist and have it put back into independent if that's what you want.
Correct.
Okay, but you can declare at this election and in November as well.
Yes.
Or you,
Yeah.
Okay.
November doesn't count.
What did she say?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. November doesn't count.
Yeah, November is going to be just one ballot. I'm sorry, you're right. It's one ballot, so it doesn't matter what you're registered.
Oh, okay.
But there are still situations, regardless of that, where people have changed their mind and they do want to change parties. But we'll just cross that bridge when it comes.
But if you're an independent and you go into November, do you have to declare your party then as well? Then, like you always do.
It's only one ballot, so everybody gets the same ballot.
Okay, so then you don't have to change your party. You just remain an independent.
Yes.
Okay, but in September, you have to declare the ballot you want and then go back and change yourself back to an independent.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I do. I'm just going to make sure I understand this with Kate. So if someone voted, just hypothetically speaking, Democrat last time around,
Mm-hmm.
and then they went back and said when the actual election comes, depending on who the candidates are, they don't want to have a party. They want to be either Democrat or Republican. How does that work?
That window is already closed for the primary.
So not for November, though.
I would have to look, Paul. The
Okay.
supervisors deal with that portion of it, and there are
Okay.
some up and coming scheduled things that they can change. But
Okay.
we're all getting one ballot, so that makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, in November, there's only one ballot that's given out.
All right, that makes sense.
September, there's two, and some people may be upset if they can only get one ballot or the other.
Right.
But November shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And that is going to come into play because say you are strictly Democrat and you want to vote for Sununu, there's going to be a lot of write-ins.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And we all know how that works.
okay.
Okay. Sorry. Denise Knowles.
So Kate, we spoke recently and you said you felt as though we have adequate volunteers for September anyway.
We do. I even called some of my, older people, and they're completely on board. So, and I even had, being open Tuesday nights, few people, new residents who've come in to register to vote who volunteered to work the election. So, I mean, I'm not going to overstaff it because I truly believe it's going to be an absentee election.
Okay,
All the work's going to be ahead of time.
that's good.
Yeah, for you.
How
Well,
is the counting gonna work in the after 7? Is it just select board or is there other people as well?
Oh, I'll try to get as many people as I can because I do anticipate, especially in the September election, a lot of write-ins. But November will be pretty, that I don't worry about November after hours. More so September. But who knows, Denise, we could have 0 cases or we could have 1,000, and that's really going to come into play with November's election.
So
There may not be anybody safe. I may not even want to show up for it. So,
yeah. Machine doesn't count a write-in. It just
No.
pushes it out. It just pushes
kicks it out. Yeah.
Okay, so other than that, it's more just confirming by counting the amount of ballots it received based on what you get for numbers out of the machine for the other
Correct.
ones.
Correct.
So I mean, if there may be a lot of write-ins, and so then how do you do that? Do you put them like we used to put the names down and
Yep.
tick.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yep.
So having the second ballot box, ballot machine wasn't going to help us with the write-ins, except that we would put it all in one machine so you don't mess up the other machine in case
Yeah.
something gets stuck.
I'm not concerned about the write-ins as far as the counting, the machine. The write-ins, it's more the absentee ballots. They tend to jam, and if we had 2 machines, we would have a backup.
Yeah.
I spoke to them today. Again, I'm second on the list to possibly get a used machine. But what they have to do is they have to hold on to X amount of machines because part of our service is if our machine jams, they have to have one to bring to us. And, that could be a 2-hour window. So I really don't want to be in that situation, but it could happen.
Oh, boy.
So in the event that our machine jammed, do you have the old ballot box there and then you just stick it in there? And those
Correct.
are kind of manually?
Yeah. Yes.
Kate, I had a question the other day that I would just love to get an answer to, so I might be able to answer the question again next time. And that is that you were saying earlier that when people vote by absentee, they have to check off the box that they were away or they're sick or whatever the reason is. And there doesn't seem to be a checkbox for COVID. So what are people supposed to check?
Well, that's been a question from many clerks why the Secretary of State didn't make that an option. And I've had quite a few emails and phone calls, and I just basically tell people that we're under the assumption that that's why they're not voting. So when I enter it in the system, I'm just entering basically any one of them unless they specifically check off handicap reasonings as COVID. I
Okay.
just note it as a COVID.
So leave it blank and it's COVID, and otherwise you
Right.
check off the appropriate. Thank you. Okay, that makes
Right.
sense.
Yep.
So when you add it in, it shows COVID, but
Mhm.
not on the form that is being sent out.
Correct.
Ah, okay.
I have the option. I have to hand type in. Could be out of state. Could be, there are things that people generally absentee vote for, but this is, of course, a different election.
Yep. Okay, so we have Lorraine on the line that had a question.
Mhm.
Is it okay if we let her on? Everyone else
Sure.
set? Lorraine,
Sure.
are you still there?
Yes, I am. Now I have two questions. I looked at the form from the Secretary of State that you download for asking for absentee ballot, and it has a check off for COVID. But what you're saying is when you enter it in the system, there's not a place for it?
No, just the opposite. Unless the latest form has COVID on it. I did fax one over to Tia 2 weeks ago. I do have to enter it in the state system regardless. You know, the form is a worksheet, basically. You could have a different address on it. You could have a different reasoning.
All I know is that when I went to the Secretary of State's office, and it says if you go to the COVID section and you download for getting the absentee ballot, when you downloaded it, had in the first top section, it talked about you're worried about COVID, and it's only for the 2020 election, and you could download that form and send it in.
Well, most people are downloading our form from the town website, so I would have to look at the revised one that I sent to you.
Oh, yeah, I think maybe you do want to look at it, but that wasn't I have another question that developed while you were talking. Are you saying that because of what's going on, we cannot be open for registration on the same day as the vote?
We can, but people are going to be hesitant. If they don't want to come in to vote, they certainly don't want to come in to register to vote.
Right, but if
it'll be available.
It will be available.
Oh, of course.
Okay, that was it. Now, the other question is, I had heard before from someone else who is running elections in a different town. They said that the SOS was saying that there could be, if the drop box is used, it would have to be accompanied by an affidavit about as if someone else were dropping off the form.
You know, Lorraine, there are towns and cities that are a little bit ridiculous about it. If Joe Blow puts in an application and he submits it through the door, I'm going to assume it was Joe Blow that submitted it through the door. I'm not going to try to police who submitted it. I mean, we have a lot of kids who are helping their parents vote. I can't police that. You know, whether the kid voted or the adult voted, I don't know. But I can't police that. And we can only hope that they're all being honest in the process.
Well, I'm relieved at that. I'm just hoping nobody suddenly challenges us on that.
No, I don't think we're going to see. I mean, there's a lot on the news. I watch it and I shake my head, and I'm so thankful that we don't get that in our town.
Thank you. Those were my big questions. Thank you so much, Kate, and for all your good.
Thanks,
Okay, is there
Lorraine.
anybody else have any questions or comments or?
Just one last comment from me. Kate, having a pizza party, thanks for, helping morale. You volunteered.
Oh, you're welcome.
That can go a long way.
Oh, I feel bad. They're here from 3 to 7, and I thought, oh God, they don't even have dinner, so I probably should at least feed them.
Well, thank you for that.
And it won't be buffet style. Don't tell the CDC.
I'm good.
All right, Miles, anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, Caroline?
Thank you, Kate and Charlie, both of you, for joining us. And it sounds like you have a good plan and it's been well thought out, and we'll hope for the best. And likewise, Kate, you're always a great support person, and you always take care of our volunteers. And I think that's part of what makes a great election, is that people want to help because we have a great sense of community in Rollinsford, and you really foster that.
Thank you. And I always lure them in with food, but this year is going to be tough because I can't do buffet style.
Right.
So I'm going to have to do individual cups of soup, and we'll figure out a way.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay, have a good evening.
Okay,
You
thank
too.
you guys. Bye. See you
All right,
then.
have a good night.
Thanks, bye.
Right.
Good night.
Okay, so we have, whoops. We're staying
We
in the
lost
same
Paul.
meeting, right?
Yeah,
We lost,
yes, but we lost Paul.
huh. You texting him?
I'm gonna text him.
Okay. Miles, when are you going on election day?
Morning.
In the
I'll be there.
morning?
Yep.
Okay.
7
So,
to 12.
there he is. Good.
Here he is. He's back.
Yay, Paul. Thank you. Yes, it sounded like you guys worked it out really well that there's coverage throughout the day.
Awesome.
So
Yep.
yeah, I think you've got that covered.
Yeah.
So the hydroelectric plant, this is a really interesting situation that I really, who could have foreseen this one coming? For a few years now, Green Mountain Power, who holds the license for the hydroelectric plant, we lease it to them, and they give us revenue for however much water goes through the hydro plant. Every 20 years, we have to renew our license with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And so Green Mountain Power has been going through an extensive process on the town's behalf and on their own behalf to renew this license with the feds. They have just submitted their final application after spending years doing upgrades to the upper dam and counting wildlife in the river and doing water quality tests and a number of different studies to show the impact of the hydroelectric dam on the river as is required by the renewal process. Last week, I got a call from someone from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because they are one of the entities that is required to weigh in on the impact of the hydroelectric dam on the river. And so Green Mountain Power submitted their final application, and the Fish and Wildlife Service is disagreeing with their science about the impact of the hydroelectric dam on the river. The Fish and Wildlife Service would like for Green Mountain Power to install one of two different designs of what is essentially a fish ladder on the Salmon Falls River to compensate for the dam, which is there for the hydroelectric dam. Green Mountain Power does not want to install anything. They have agreed to perform a study to count. They're going to prove that fish can get up the river, but how they're going to do that is very vague, and it's not really clear that scientifically that would really prove much of anything. If one fish gets to the top of the rocks, does that mean that we don't have a fish traveling problem? So they, according to the Fish and Wildlife Service, they have not really substantiated their argument for how what they propose to do is going to meet any basic scientific requirement. At least that is the Fish and Wildlife Service's argument. Whether they can prove that fish are traveling without a problem or not, they do not have in their plan to build any kind of fish ladder system. Instead, they are offering, I don't know if this would be the plan either way, maybe only if the fish have trouble traveling, they would trap and truck fish from south of the South Berwick Dam to north of the Rollinsford Dam as a bypass. no doubt that's the less expensive option. So the Fish and Wildlife Service has 45 days from the time when Green Mountain Power submitted this final application to FERC to settle this, or it goes to court. Settling it is an option that stops that 45-day clock, and it starts a new clock of 120 days that they can have to work out some kind of compromise. The result of that compromise, whether they reach an agreement or not, at the end of that process, whatever remains of the 45 days, that clock starts up again. The Fish and Wildlife Service would very much like for as much of that 45-day window to be available to them at the end of this process as possible, to help them prepare for the trial that's going to happen if they're unable to settle. We are already at least 2 weeks into that 45-day period. I sent you all an email of the documents that Fish and Wildlife Service is suggesting that the town perhaps should sign. But what's really not clear, and I've been through the documents related to the relicensing, and I've not been able to find anything that specifically, so who would sign this document, settling with Fish and Wildlife? Would it be the town of Rollinsford as the owner of the hydroelectric dam, or would it be Green Mountain Power as the lessee of the hydroelectric plant? That we don't have the answer to that, because I don't have a piece of paper that says we, the town of Rollinsford, are signing over what exactly to Green Mountain Power. All I can find is the original contract when the hydroelectric dam was originally leased out to the original energy company decades ago. So I've reached out to the engineers that have been managing this relicensing project on behalf of Green Mountain Power to see if they can find for me that contract, or forward my email to somebody who may be able to get that to me. I don't have that. So what I'm suggesting to the board at this point is that we get legal involved. And the reason for that is that there's a substantial amount of revenue at stake, annual revenue that the town receives as a result of the hydroelectric plant. It's not clear what might happen if Green Mountain Power refuses to settle, or if they are unable to reach an agreement. It's not clear, does the town have a voice in saying, we would like to spend the money to build a fish ladder, or we would like to compel Green Mountain Power to settle, or we don't have a voice and we're just going to let Green Mountain Power do whatever they want to do. Without that contract, you all can have discussions about what you might like to do with this situation, but it's not clear what the town's power may or may not be. But the hydroelectric license may be in jeopardy if it is not able to be renewed, if no agreement is able to be reached. And if the town has a voice in those negotiations, then I think the town ought to have a voice, so that you can have hopefully a little bit more control over what the outcome may be.
I got a
Okay.
quick question. Is there any other government entity involved besides the Fish and Wildlife?
Department of Environmental Services at the very least. So the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is the body that will ultimately grant the license.
Did you say that again? The name?
FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Okay. So I did have time to go through your emails, and I did sort of follow what you're talking about today.
Good. Thank you.
It was a very long one about the fish.
It's a complicated situation, and the relicensing project itself is not simple. The final application is is many pages long because of all this documentation about how many eels we have. And, so Fish and Wildlife Service is, they've created these recommendations based on the science as a result of the Endangered Species Act and the alewife and the eels that live and other wild, other fish that live in our river. That's really the point of this, and why they are asked to weigh in on the process. I think the Department of Environmental Services is more about water quality and conservation and that stuff. So I believe those are the only two entities that are officially weighing in to FERC to give their opinion, or the only ones that are sort of required to. But because this is a public process, anybody as a citizen certainly has the right, or any other entity that wants to would have the right to weigh in on the process and have an opinion.
Is South Park Dam also involved in this?
They are separately undergoing relicensing. So, of course, it's the same river. So theoretically, the same science applies as to what's going on with the species that live in the river and the water quality. But it's its own separate process with different engineers by a different company. So I can't, I have a feeling that what happens to one may relate to what happens to another, because we're in this process at the same time. But I wouldn't want to say that they're necessarily actually tied. FERC has two different licensing processes, and we're going through kind of the least involved process. And I don't know that they're going through that same process or a more rigorous process. I'm not sure why one might go through one and not the other, frankly. So all I can tell you is that they are up for relicensing now also.
Okay. Do we know how much it is to put in a fish ladder? What is a fish ladder?
Okay, so if you go, I encourage you to go park in downtown Dover on Central Ave, where the bridge goes over the river there by the mills, and get out of your car, and you can see on the side of the wall of the river down there, you can see this structure that looks like a second wall to the river. And it has little sections to it. So a fish ladder is kind of like a bucket that the fish can swim into, and then there's a higher bucket and they can swim into the higher bucket, and then there's a higher bucket and they can swim into that. So it's a more stable way for the fish to be able to travel up and down a river where it's either very rocky or they can use that to bypass a dam. But it's important for breeding because typically they go way up river to breed, but they want to migrate eventually out to the ocean and then come back later to breed, and they need to go back and forth as part of their life cycle. So that's why it's important to the species. So I asked Fish and Wildlife if they would give me even a ballpark for what a fish ladder, and they have a fancier name. They're not calling it a fish ladder, but that's essentially what it is. And there are two different designs that they're suggesting. So I imagine that the cost would be different depending on which design. Either way, I have no idea. They wouldn't comment. Engineering is involved. You have to figure out, if you park behind the library and you look upstream and you see how much bedrock is there, are they building it on top of the bedrock, or are they blasting it to go like level and in between the bedrock? I imagine that there's more than what, I mean, they're suggesting one of two designs, but I would guess that there are several ways that you could potentially build this. So I don't know. I have no idea. The other thing is, though, I would have to think that there must be some offsetting grant money. And I don't know the answer to this. I thought I'd reach out to Dover since they do have a similar structure that I don't think is that old, or else I think they repaired it not all that long ago. So I thought I would ask Dover what their experience was with putting that in there, and whether it was DES they worked with or some other agency, and whether or not they're aware of offsetting grants that may be helpful.
So Dover's, I've seen Dover's. I just didn't know how it worked. So I've seen it. So what is it doing? When at that dam, that thing turns into salt water, right? In
South
Dover?
of that dam, like at the bottom, like at Henry Law Park, that's brackish tidal water, yes.
Right.
But north
Okay,
of, yeah,
so when it goes off of the South Berwick Dam, that does the same thing.
right.
We're totally still fresh water and anything to
Right.
do with Rollinsford. So how does that help in our area? Is their goal is to get the fish into the ocean water? Is that the goal? I
Well,
don't
it's
go
it's it's both. Like, so,
to come back up and to go down. But
well,
isn't it
right.
but
Because
isn't it really South Berwick's side of it that should be doing that and not Rollinsford?
well, so when Green Mountain Power is agreeing to trap and truck fish, they're agreeing to do that from south of the South Berwick Dam to north of our dam. So they're bypassing two dams. So and in that way, maybe the relicensing or the agreement about how relicensing might happen may be tied with what happens in Rollinsford may also happen in South Berwick. So you're right. I mean, they have a dam, and fixing travel for fish on our dam without addressing travel for fish with the South Berwick Dam, you're not really helping anything unless you do both.
Well, yeah, I guess that's my point.
Yeah,
Oh.
but they do get injured on their way down. So even though water flows down, they can get injured coming. If you have a really high dam and the water is smashing onto bedrock below, the fish can get injured. And so that's not necessarily, even though they may make it, some of them, it's not really the best way for them to travel, because they can get they can be injured or die through that experience. So they did make clear that, of course, upstream is kind of more critical. They're also concerned about downstream travel.
So it doesn't make sense for Rollinsford and South Berwick to join forces and just have one ladder?
Well,
Okay.
they're two different dams, so I don't think you're going to have one ladder, but you might still have like a unified approach in some way, because if we build a ladder and South Berwick says they're fine with trapping and trucking fish, then why did we just pay for a ladder?
Oh, okay. So I know. So we don't know what their intention is to be or to do. So I guess I just don't understand, because they're so close. I don't know. I think we should talk to them.
I agree.
I just think that we're, somehow could join forces and have one solution and not have two of us doing the same thing. It doesn't make sense to me. Just because we're so close, and there's not others that are not that close. Like Dover doesn't have anybody else close to them that has that. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know.
Well, so you're quite right, and I will call them because I think it's prudent to do so, but we're still stuck with the problem about, do we have any authority to have a voice in this?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
So
know.
I just got a quick question, because Denise brought up something that's really, if the lower dam, the South Berwick Dam, if they're not required to do a fish ladder or something like that, I mean, it kind of makes it a moot point, because the fish can't get up to the Legion and come up to us. So I would think they would want to address that dam before they address our dam, so to speak.
That makes sense.
Conservative effort with South Berwick was a good idea, but I can't believe they'd make us put a fish ladder in and not the lower dam.
Well, I'm sure that was part of their recommendation, since, the trucking had to do with south of the South Berwick Dam. Their Fish and Wildlife Services is clearly recognizing your point, Paul. I don't know, and so, like I said, they're up for relicensing at the same time, but that doesn't mean they're going to take the same approach, but yet the approach needs to be tied together. Otherwise, what's the point? Because you're right, Paul. Like let's not, we don't need a ladder if South Berwick isn't going to get a ladder, because that's not going to be really very helpful. So, so I will call South Berwick, and I can certainly find out what the recommendation was about. And actually, it's on the FERC website. All of the materials. So as much as you all want to read there, you can read the recommendations of to FERC for both licenses. So I can look that up too.
Okay.
So would this give us cause to be able to delay it more so because of the two situations are so close and work together? Would it give us that cause to have a delay in getting it versus, going to court and all of that right now and try to see if we can work together with it?
I can't say, as it stands right now, if the correct party signs this settlement form, whether it be the town or Green Mountain Power, that signs this settlement form, which just starts the 120-day clock for, to open the opportunity that there may be a settlement. Those are the current rules. So one could certainly appeal those current, those rules and say that, because of whatever the extenuating circumstances are with this nearby dam, that we should be allowed more time to work out a combined approach and bring South Berwick to the table so that we're all negotiating one bigger project rather than two separate projects. I don't know. I mean, one could certainly make the argument for that. I don't know whether FERC would, you can appeal that decision to FERC and see their process to them and see if they would allow for more time. They wouldn't have to. I can't say whether they would or not.
Okay, so your original question was, can you call legal? That was the original discussion. So who in legal are you going to call? Because they have to be familiar with this kind of task.
Yeah. And so I think I would probably go with John Radigan, just because it's a little bit closer to land use stuff than, and he is a municipal attorney. But I don't know that either of our regular attorneys has experience in these kinds of things. These licenses happen so infrequently that all of the current staff at Fish and Wildlife Service have never been through this trial before that would happen if a settlement agreement isn't reached. So it's not something that happens frequently. So I don't know that any attorney that we've ever worked with has experience in this or not. So I can certainly ask and go with whichever one seems to be more experienced in these things. But my first guess would be John Radigan, just because it's closer to land use.
Well, Dover might give you some insight on that too.
That's
Maybe
a good point too.
they may have gotten through legal.
That's a great idea.
I'm not sure that I'm opposed to legal consultation, but I don't want to waste a whole lot of money trying to find the right legal to consult with. I mean,
yes, we need to find one and move on, because the point is to get an opinion rather than to spend all day interviewing people. But I guess the fundamental question that everything we just discussed is really moot if we don't have a voice at the table. And we need to find the right paperwork that will help us understand, do we have a voice at the table or not? And if we don't have a voice at the table, what are the potential outcomes, and do we have any recourse?
Okay.
So,
Miles, sorry.
Go ahead, Paul.
So the thing I'm having a tough time putting my head around is Green Mountain Power. If it's profitable for them, I don't know how much money they make. I don't want to take a guess, but they're making a good profit. I don't understand why they don't want to work with the Fish and Game to come up with a simple compromise, unless this fish ladder is tens of thousands of dollars.
And I guess it is. Yes, I'm guessing with engineering and everything that it is, because because you're thinking about it along the right lines, Paul. Like, why, you want your license, you want to earn your money, this is your livelihood for the next 20 years. Why wouldn't you cooperate? I think, the obvious answer is because it's too expensive.
Okay. That's probably it, but I'm curious of what it is.
Yeah.
Do we have those numbers?
No,
Okay.
Fish and Wildlife wouldn't even speculate what it might cost, but I would say it's tens of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
Because you have to get engineers to decide what's the right option and what's really going to work, and how much rock do we have to blast, or can we really secure it above the rocks?
All right.
I wouldn't want to try to build it.
Miles, did you have something you wanted to say?
I guess yeah, it's sorry, I've got multiple thoughts. I was going to ask the question, why is this now an issue? This dam has been there for however many hundreds of years, and I know that the hydro part is not as old, but so they must be doing this in all parts of the country, like all hydro.
Yes, I believe that they are, that they evaluate these projects as they come up for renewal, and this is part of regulation that was created as a result of the Endangered Species Act, so that so FERC is charged with the question of whether or not to renew the license. And so they need information to evaluate in order to make that decision. Well, since it impacts wildlife because it's this natural river out in the world, they, because of the Endangered Species Act, they ask Fish and Wildlife, what do you think? Is there any reason, like what should we consider? Is there anything we should need to know when we are evaluating this project? So Fish and Wildlife is very much taking this from the perspective of the endangered and threatened species to say, how can we best help them? These are the things that you should be doing. That doesn't mean that FERC is going to require it, but at the same time, why wouldn't they? So,
well, I can think of
it's
lots
all
of
about
reasons,
who has a voice at the table and what they say.
So if the legal opinion is that we don't have a voice at the table, so this is just Green Mountain and Fish and Wildlife is their thing to figure out. Is that what I'm to understand?
That is a possible scenario. It's not clear. That's what I need legal assistance with. Like, it may be that this is for Green Mountain Power to work out on our behalf. We gave them license to do that. Like, go renew this license for us. And they said, yes, we will do that. And they're spending all the money on engineering, and they spent all the money repairing the dam. So they have a stake in the game. But that's, who's to say that legally that negates our voice? Maybe we do still have a voice.
I guess I just don't know what would our voice say. I think Green Mountain, I don't know, we've already said Green Mountain here, this is your thing, go run with it. Well, I don't know what what would be different.
The other idea is, maybe the board wants to have a meeting with executives from Green Mountain Power and their engineers to say, we understand you came to a different conclusion than Fish and Wildlife. Tell us about that. How much do you think this fish ladder might cost, and why would you be opposed to that? And, how do you see this playing out? And will you listen to us about our opinion and see what they say about it?
Because bottom line is, they shut them down, then we're losing a lot of revenue ourselves.
But they are too, so they shouldn't want that any more than you do. Yeah.
Right, but that's where we're involved in that fact that we're going to lose a lot of revenue from the lease of the.
Right, but they put in, tens of thousands of dollars already in professional services to get the license as far as it's gotten over the last 2 or 3 years. So, you know, and so their revenue is at risk, plus they're already in the hole for all these, you know, services that they've paid for to get this far. So they budgeted for that. They knew that because they agreed to take this on for us, but still they can't be, they would have to want this to be a successful product in the end.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's something. So what is the board's desire? Shall we go to legal first, or do you want to try to get a meeting together with Green Mountain Power and see if that's a better first step, keeping in mind that we have, you know, the 45 days, we're already like 2 or 3 weeks into that.
Well, we could do both too. I mean, we could
Yeah.
consult.
Caroline, or this is Lorraine. Is there any way I can I just want to ask a question. Is there any way that somehow that if there is an agreement that Green Mountain Power comes to, and they decide that they fluff the agreement, are we responsible and on the hook?
That's a good question.
Good point. Good point.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you.
That's my only question.
That's a good one.
You earned your wages for the night.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
That's the only thing that worries me. I mean, you know, if we just let them do their thing, I don't think we can just sit back and let everybody just do whatever they're going to do unless we know the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm. Paul and Miles, any?
My suggestion would probably be to at least have Caroline research and find out if we can get a legal opinion on it without spending a whole bunch of time trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I guess I'd be open to meeting with Green Mountain Power too to see what their opinion is. But I'm pretty sure they're going to be like, you know, we spent this money fixing the dam and stuff. We're not going to spend $100,000 doing a fish ladder. Is my guess.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
I agree with you, both of you, that I'm willing to get a legal opinion as well. With the right people, though. Let's just make sure we do some research on that. The only thing is that I find it like, why aren't they letting us try to do a simpler solution before making us do something that's so very expensive? And if it can be proven by just doing what they said that they would be willing to do, I don't understand why they won't go down that road with us, you know, with them, you know. Why are they trying to go strictly to the $100,000 fish ladder, you know?
Well, so there are two designs for what I'm calling a fish ladder, but some kind of back and forth transport mechanism. The only answer I can give you about that is because they're wildlife biologists and they know these species and they know that they need it. That would, you know, they need, you know, version A or version B, but they need something. But what does need mean? You know, like what happens to the species if we don't do this and the dam stays there? You know, I think, you know, it may say that in the billions of pages of reports that we have in that drive folder. But Fish and Wildlife Service, their only motivation is the wildlife, you know, and that's why they're not bending, I would say, is because regardless of how you move forward, they feel strongly that the species need one of these mechanisms.
So I just want to play devil's advocate. So that we go through this, we don't come to an agreement, the hydro plant gets shut down, we're not putting in a ladder. There's not going to be any fish moving up that river. Like
Well, that's very true. You're right.
Good point, Miles.
But
Yeah.
you know,
Unless
I
Fish and
don't-
Game puts in the ladder, which they
Right.
can't, right? Because it's not their property, right?
That's a good
Well,
point.
I don't know if I wouldn't say they can't. I think, you know, maybe they could, maybe that's a really interesting question because that river is, it's a state line. And, certainly the shoreline is, on our side is New Hampshire and it's Rollinsford, and on that side it's Maine. And theoretically the land underneath belongs to one town or the other, but when you bring in water, the rules change, and I wouldn't say that they don't have the right, especially with, what does the Endangered Species Act say exactly about the lengths that the government can go to save a species if they think it needs it? I don't know. But to my mind, that's where funding comes in. If it's really such a big deal, then there must be funding available to do this, or at least to help with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, are we in agreement that she can at least seek some guidance on what Rollinsford's impact would be with legal?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
we should probably make that a vote by roll call, a motion and a vote by roll call.
Sure. I'll move that we authorize Caroline to seek a legal opinion on the issue with the hydro plant.
And I will second that.
Okay, so I will do a roll call vote. Miles,
Yes?
Paul,
Yes.
and Denise, yes. Okay,
Okay.
so that part of it's taken care of. And you'll get back to us once you find somebody who is good at this and gives us some advice.
Yes, and then do you also at the same time want for me to reach out to Green Mountain Power and try to set up a meeting with you all and them? Or do you want to wait and hear back from legal first?
I think we should hear back from legal, don't you?
Yeah, I'm not sure what would get out of a meeting with them.
Yeah.
Until we know what our legal recourse is, for sure.
Yeah, we might have
Okay.
a voice at the table, so if we don't have a voice at the table, it's not going to matter.
Right, right.
Well, you might not legally have a voice at the table, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a friendly conversation and say, hey, we're in this together. Do you think, we can just talk about it?
Agreed.
And,
Yeah, let's hear what the legal says first.
Okay.
Wait a minute. When does the clock stop, though? When does...
I don't know when the 45 days,
Sounds like
but
we
that
got
is,
very-
that is the most urgent question, which is the question before legal is, we don't know if, so Fish and Wildlife wants either the town to sign this form saying we'll enter into settlement agreements or negotiations, or they want Green Mountain Power to sign these forms. I emailed them to you so you can read them and review them, but we need to know that you have the authority to sign it first. And so the more urgent question is before legal, do you have the authority to sign these forms?
Yep. Okay.
Sounds good.
So, yeah, let's pursue legal first, and then we can get, if the next step is Green Mountain, then that's what we'll do.
All
I
right.
would say that's
Very
the
good.
best
Thank
way to handle it. Okay, so any other questions on this? Are we all set?
Yep.
I think we're good.
Okay, so then we have one thing that we have to do for Chief Ducharme.
Yes, I will
Okay.
share my screen in just a moment. Gonna pull it up here. I emailed it to you this afternoon, a purchase order that the chief is requesting. There you go.
All right, I'll go ahead and move purchase order 1921 to Two-Way Communications in the amount of $13,187 to equip the new Cruiser 74.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
All right, any discussion on that?
Have we discussed this? Just forgive my vagueness on this, but have we discussed this before? Or did this one just come up?
Well, this is kind of a standard operating procedure. You usually take all the old equipment off of the one that we're going to dispose of and put it onto the new one.
Okay. I would just-
This is kind of this is something that they do, so they don't buy all new equipment. It's, it's radios and light bars and those kind of things. They take it off the old one and put it on the new one when it comes in.
it just seems 13,000 seems like a lot.
So if you look
Oh,
on the left-hand side, $12,000 is coming from the Warren article, which means it's coming from the capital improvement plan. So that's not, it's not in the
Right.
operating budget, but he's
Well,
taking
$2,000.
1187 from the operating budget to boost that.
Okay. I see that down below.
So it's some of the equipment and installing new equipment as well. Does that Warren article cover the new equipment as well,
Yes.
Caroline? I see. Okay, that's why it's so high, Paul.
Okay, I got it.
It's
Makes
some of
sense.
the
Thank you.
equipment. Because if they couldn't use it on this, then they would keep it in their stock room if something went wrong on another cruiser, like, a
Okay.
light bulb failed or something.
Yep, I
So-
see it down there. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions then?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none, I'll call the vote and I will do a roll call vote. Miles,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
and Denise, yes. So,
Okay.
okay. And there's nothing else that we needed to talk about tonight?
There's always more to talk about, but that was your agenda. So
Okay.
does anybody
right.
have any questions or anything they want to review?
No, I just wanted to say, Caroline, thank you for the information on the dam. It seems pretty all over the place, but there's a lot to read.
Yeah.
Thanks. You
A lot
seem
to
like
read.
you're at least trying to stay up to date on it, so thanks on that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will give you one other quick update. I got a call from Dover today. If you recall, we sent a letter, or we signed a letter or sent our own letter to the commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, asking to sit down with them and have a conversation about nitrogen, and can we come to a compromise and talk about where we disagree and try to work it out. And it looks like that might happen. I don't know what might come out of that meeting, but the first week of September, they're looking to do that. So it's likely to be during the day, but if it's important to any of you and you want to join, let me know and I'll make sure you get a link to it. In the meantime, the city of Rochester, you might have seen in Foster's, they are proposing a very different approach to the permit, which would, it's just a different science-based approach that doesn't hold to the same nitrogen levels, but it does bring in other elements and other ways of managing nutrients that they believe would have a better impact on Great Bay, which is the goal, is to help the health of Great Bay. So the Dover engineers have worked out this other kind of an olive branch. Let's talk about a completely different approach. Their engineers worked that out. We have no way of evaluating that, what the cost would be, how would we manage that, what would we be required to do under such a permit? There's no way to know that. The other communities in our group that are all subject to the MS4 permit, those that have engineers are reviewing it. I just wanted to let you know that it was a proposal that's out there. I don't know what's going to happen with that. We can certainly hire engineers to tell us, but my guess is the other communities will help us understand what it will mean for us, because they're going to want our support. And DES, we believe, really wants a unified approach to this permit with everybody's support. They would like to have everybody on board with the same idea. So just stay tuned, and hopefully we'll have more information in the coming weeks about whether or not that looks like a better plan for Rollinsford or not, but it may end up being what gets put upon us, whether we like it or not, too. That's the other thing. So just more discussions. So,
Is Clem still serving on the committee with you?
no, because he was representing the Water Sewer District and he's no longer a committee, not privy to those conversations anymore.
Oh, okay. So nobody on sewer and water is being part of this with you?
The last meeting, Ray McNeil and Allison Cullity both joined. So I would hope that I will ask if they got this call as well, if they're going to be coming to this next. They in theory, they're part of this group now that they changed email addresses. So now they're corresponding with Ray McNeil and Allison Cullity. And I believe even Pat Paluski. I don't know if he was able to join or not, but he's paying attention to the conversation. So
Okay.
that's good.
All righty. Very good. That sounds good. Any other questions or comments from either one of you?
Nope.
Miles? No?
Good.
Okay. So that's all we have. So
That is
again.
all.
We meet
Thank you
again.
all for your time.
We meet again next week as a regular meeting, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And Paul has rec this week.
I do Wednesday. Yep.
Okay. So I did see something on email that was rec.
Correct.
So, all right. We're going to have that on our next agenda. I would like to discuss rec. We need to get more people involved.
Yeah, I'll see how Wednesday's meetings go and see if
Okay.
there's any insight to that or anything.
All right. Give me an update on that and we'll see if we can do one final push or something.
Sounds good to
Okay.
me.
Okay.
Tomorrow night is planning board with Cast Towing. So if anybody's curious about how Cast Towing is going to get through planning, you can tune in.
What time is that?
7 o'clock.
Is that the one that Harry's on, or is he on
Yes.
zoning? Oh, he's on.
No, he's on planning.
He's on planning. Okay, I'll remind him. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
6:53. Okay. Roll call. Paul,
Yes.
Miles,
Yes.
and Denise. Yes. Have a good night, everyone.
Good
Thanks
night.
for all the hard
Thank you.
work,
You
Caroline.
too. Thank
All
you.
right.
Have a good one.
You
Bye
too, guys.